How do we bring health, wellness, and education to rural parts of the Finger Lakes? Hey guys, welcome back to Inside the FLX. I'm Josh Durso, and today we're exploring that very question. There's no doubt that rural communities have unique challenges around food scarcity, transportation, and housing. In Seneca County, though, a trio of organizations are working together to create community-based solutions. My guests this hour include Dr. Deborah Putney, an asset-based community development expert for the Greater Rochester Health Foundation, and retired professor from Northwestern University, Teresa Lahr, project coordinator for STEPS, Seneca Town's Engaging People for Solutions, and Carol Titus. She's a resident work group leader for STEPS and serves as pantry director for the Lodi Food for All Pantry, which operates weekly in the village of Lodi. Remember, Inside the FLX is available on iTunes, Stitcher, and FingerLakes1.com. But before we get to our conversation, here's a word from today's show sponsor. Inside the FLX and other programming on FingerLakes1.com is made possible by local sponsors supporting local reporting. Learn more about advertising on Finger Lakes One by clicking on the Advertise button at the bottom of our homepage.
I was severely injured. I was on a ventilator. My husband was scared and he just went for the nearest number that he had heard advertised over and over and figured they're the best, they know what they're doing. I think that's the typical reaction, but unfortunately it wasn't the right one. And I'm thankful that we learned that early on in the process. He decided to look for someone locally who would give us a little more personalized attention. And when we met Steve and talked with him, we knew that we had found that person. If you want to feel like you have an attorney who's in your corner, who's going to listen to you, who's going to endeavor to understand you, give Steve a call. I really felt like everyone at Madej, Mears, and Rickey really cared.
For a law firm that cares about you, contact Madej, Mears, and Rickey at 315-568-0911. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome.
So thank you guys for being here today. First and foremost, really important conversation that I think needs to happen for people to understand what is going on here in Seneca County. First, let's kick things off. What is STEPS? What is STEPS, the entity?
So STEPS stands for Seneca Town's Engaging People for Solutions. We're a neighborhood health improvement project on the southern end of Seneca County, involving the towns of Covert, Lodi, Ovid, and Romulus. So over 10,000 residents are involved in this project. We are a grassroots and an asset-based community development project that long-term goals are really to improve health outcomes. We're very focused. We must focus on the social determinants of health. So, in other words, our economic, the context in which we live, our economic opportunities, our physical health, our social and emotional well-being. We know that that is connected. Research shows us that makes a difference in our health outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Now, what does, for those who might not, they might be asking, what does a day at work look like for you as someone who obviously has to work pretty hard, I would imagine, to keep the wheels of progress moving forward?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of balls in the air in this work. You're dealing with the human element and a lot of different people and personalities and partnerships and so on. It's fabulous work. So a day is kind of, we actually have formal plans because we need to accomplish things. We are accountable in our outputs to our funder, which Deborah will talk about later. But you go into the office and then you have a plan in place, and then something could come up. Hey, the flash floods came up in mid-August, so we kind of shift gears there. And the STEPS community, which is just residents, average residents that live, work, and play in our four towns, come together and support each other in that effort. So an average day looks kind of like that. Originally we developed a community health improvement plan. This is something designed by residents. We have 3 major focus areas, and within those focus areas we have activities and we have strategies and activities to meet those strategies. So we're obligated to those. They're a larger plan. But things come up, as you know. Suicide rates go up, opioid crisis comes up. So we have a flexible enough plan to align with the needs, whatever residents are, where the energy is and where they want to take action. That's what we do.
And how important is the flexibility aspect of that, just in terms of always being ready for God only knows what?
Well, I think this is a whole paradigm shift, Josh. We must be very flexible in our work. I'll tell you that, even I, with a health and human service background or a medical background in an internist office, you're used to thinking a certain way. You're my case, you're my client, and I have good ideas for you, Josh, and here's how you can fix it.
Yeah.
This is none of that. This is ideas generated, and we were funded because of this. Our pioneers, Carol is one of them, came together and said, you know what? We're going to focus on all the good things. We've taken some hits here in our southern end of the county, and we're going to focus on all our assets and build upon that. So flexibility is key in this role, and really what I'm trying to articulate is that you can have the best laid plans, but things, you have to switch gears, and you have to be able to listen. This is all about listening. Listening to what the assets are and where people are ready to take action and what they want to do. We have a very small staff. I'm the project coordinator. I have an outreach and media gal part-time, and a community engagement specialist part-time, and now a community business mentor that works on the economic and entrepreneurial type work, because in our area that's critical, right?
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, okay. So, and then there is the Greater Rochester Health Foundation, which is the funder, as has been pointed out. Talk to us a little bit about what the Greater Rochester Health Foundation is, how it functions, and how it came into this role of overseeing STEPS in Seneca County.
Okay, sure. So the Greater Rochester Health Foundation is actually in the city of Rochester, but it serves the entire Greater Rochester area. It's a grant-making public charity. And so they do a variety of kinds of grants, but all their grant programs are focused in some way, one way or another, on health. So they've got a variety of programs, and about 9 years ago, or maybe close to 10 years ago, one of the program officers said, we really need to be doing something in neighborhoods that's a bit different from the normal kinds of things we might fund. And at that time, the whole notion of the social determinants of health was emerging. So providers and all sorts of people, researchers, everybody involved in health outcomes began to be aware that you cannot deliver health to people. A hospital cannot, they might be able to fix something that's wrong at the moment, but they don't deliver health. So there was a growing body of evidence that being in a place with people who are living in the place, working with those people on building health, was a whole other aspect to how do you create a healthy community. So they designed this funding program called the Neighborhood Health Status Improvement Initiative, and this launched in 2008. Over the years, there have been grantees that have kind of come and gone. For some, the approach of asset-based community development didn't fit, but for quite a few it did. And so they made what, in a general picture of how big grants are, especially in a neighborhood like this, very generous grants, with another unique characteristic of those grants being a long-term investment. So these grants are not just a year, but essentially with regular annual sort of demonstration of impact, these grants go for about 10 years. So STEPS is approaching its 6th year, I think.
Yeah, we'll be writing phase 4.
Yes. This is very, very unique among all kinds of funders, the long-term investment. But what this long-term view does is acknowledge that it's been a long time coming to build an unhealthy populace, and so it's going to take a while and a lot of investment in an ongoing way supporting neighborhoods to do this work. So the project, the Neighborhood Health Status Improvement Initiative, funds at this point 3 neighborhood groups, very much like STEPS. One is also, another is a rural group north of the Thruway, and there is one in inner city Rochester. And they all have listened to their residents. They all are focusing on the social determinants of health, but they're doing it in their place and focused on their unique issues. And they're all somewhat different. But this asset-based community development approach, which is where I come in, the foundation supports me to be a technical support provider in implementing the asset-based community development approach. So I've had the very great pleasure of working with the grantees for all these years, helping them keep the grassroots focus, keep the place-based focus, not to drift into becoming service providers, but to actually be listening to their residents, and as Teresa just said quite eloquently, listening to them and then making plans for action around what residents are interested in actually doing. So this is let's identify who we are and what we've got going for us, and then we're going to get out there and just do it.
Now, I have to ask, because it seems pretty fitting. You see these different operations and how they sort of work. What are some of the differences that folks might see compared to a City of Rochester neighborhood initiative, compared to like South Seneca, where it's a much broader space, or seems like a much broader space?
You're absolutely right. The geography is dramatically different. The inner city neighborhood has as many people in about a 10 square block area as these folks have in many miles square.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference. You can't do a whole lot of door knocking because you'd have to be driving a mile to the next house out here, whereas in the city you can just walk down the street. So the actual engagement process is a bit different. Over the years, one of the things I've noticed is that in rural communities, they've got a real advantage, which is that rural communities have always tended to come together and help each other out. It's different in the inner city, where there's more issues of trust. And so the city group has spent time kind of building trust among neighbors, whereas here the issues tend to be more the geography and how far apart people are and how do you bring them together to act together.
And is that why it's important to have folks like Teresa and Carol sort of on the ground in the community, understanding the playbook and how it works in their own backyard compared to a large entity trying to say, well, this is how you need to do it?
Absolutely. That's what the approach is about. We call it ABCD. Asset-based community development is a grassroots, place-based approach that relies on and is indeed built on identifying the good stuff in a community and then mobilizing that. So I consider, in all of these communities, we would call a leader anybody who is willing to come out of their house and step up and lead something. Right. They don't have to be a person with a special hat that says I'm a leader, but if they have an interest and they can bring together a group of people who will join with them, those are leaders. So I say Teresa's job and the STEPS team, I would say that what they are is community connectors. So their job is to think about, what have we got here? Who are the people? Who are the local associations? Who are the institutions that are interested in doing something with us? And then making connections among those various kinds of groups. That's what Teresa does.
Yeah.
As she was telling you, what does a day look like? I'd say that's what her day looks like, is talking to this person and saying, oh, you should know that person, or you should talk to the principal at the school. So she's connecting people, and then they run with the ball and do whatever it is.
And it sounds kind of like the goal is to fill some of the gaps that exist, and to sort of be the connector, as you're saying, the connector, but to be on the lookout for those opportunities where you can connect folks, right?
Yes.
Listening.
Yes. So when a resident idea comes up, people are listening, and people are saying, we should get these two groups together, or the school will be a great partner for that effort, or a church. So it's really, it is exactly that.
So let's shift over to Carol now. What is your role in this whole process, and where do you sort of step in and work with these great folks?
Well, I'm a resident. I happen to live in Lodi, and we saw a need. So we tried to gather people together to meet that need. and it's just not a single need, but several ideas have developed. So there are food pantries in Ovid and Interlaken, and we had a group of folks who said we need one in Lodi. So we partnered with the library, and on the front lawn started a pantry with donations from anyone who had things in their garden, who could bring them and share them. We partnered with the Friendship
Food Network.
Donations Network in Ithaca, where the stores and restaurants donate food and we go down and pick them up. So every Saturday from 3 to 5, we gather what donations there are of food. A lot of it is organic, and offer it to anybody in the area. We have folks who come from Schuyler County, we have folks come from northern Seneca County, and all up the Cuga, Seneca Lake area.
Yep.
So the idea is there's a need for food. Folks have told us that it's a technical term of food scarcity that we're trying to meet. And what we did was write a grant. We've been doing this for 3 years, 3.5 years. And we wrote a grant that would help us expand the program because we had so many people expressing a need and visiting our food pantry. So we wrote a grant that would address food scarcity and also social isolation. Many of our folks live alone. They don't get to talk to other people. They might go to the store, but they don't really have conversations. So at our food pantry, we have a hospitality table that serves hot and cold drinks and sometimes samples of the food that are in the pantry that day. But we've seen an incredible development of friendships develop between these folks who were very isolated. And at the same time, they go home with a nice bag full of wonderful, nutritious food. So we are partnering with not only with the Friendship Donations Network in Ithaca, but we also are working with Food Link organization. In addition to those who provide food, we have local farms such as Blue Heron Farm, Six Circles, and Westwind Farm, who provide food every week, and a lot of it organic and very nutritious, a lot of produce. We also have local businesses who support us, and scout groups and individuals. We have folks who go out and glean their garden and bring in all these watermelons, all these tomatoes, all these cucumbers, and they share them with us. So we're getting so many donations, and I didn't mention that we moved from the library lawn to the Lodi Presbyterian Church, who very graciously offered us space, and the space for storing donations is very small, and the donation stream just blossomed.
It's growing.
and we didn't have a place to store it. So we wrote the grant to the Greater Rochester Health Foundation to have a program. First of all, we purchased a shed to store these donations in, but along with that, we developed classes that taught people how to produce food. We had a demonstration garden using straw bales and a raised garden sort of idea. We are also going to have classes on preservation, but in every pantry day we talk about recipes and what is that food? What is that round thing, or what is that leafy thing? A lot of people don't know, and sometimes we don't, so we go to the internet. But we learn not only what the foods are, but how to use them in everyday meals. And in addition to that, we're going to have preservation classes, and we're also going to be able to lend the equipment such as canners, dehydrators, and other things that people will need to actually harvest their gardens and actually store it for the winter. So it's kind of a lending organization as well.
A real community-based, working together instead of...
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
So a few things mentioned there that I just want to get all of your takes on. The isolation factor. I'm very, very curious. Obviously, STEPS is working very hard, and organizations are all working hard to connect people, but how difficult is it when you're just talking about a rural, expansive area?
It can be a challenge. I like to say, Deborah, you know how I say I think isolation is the new smoking when it comes to health outcomes, and we see it a lot in our area. Of course, there's a lot of little pockets of that Carol referred to, but I'm going to just speak for a moment about, say, a senior citizen housing group in Verona, in Ovid. There was a group that people just really felt very isolated, not enough activities to do. So one of our amazing resident leaders said, well, let's strategically place our garden, our community garden, near the path of Verona Village. And because there were so many people that live there, are from the area, they've been gardening their whole lives, the country folks, right? And they miss that, and there isn't an opportunity to do that. So in partnership, and this just gives you an idea of how STEPS work, in partnership with, say, the Lions Club, they build some waist-high raised beds for our folks so that they could participate, take the path down and garden. We had about 4 plots, I believe, to Verona Village's residents. One woman took and expanded a whole beautiful butterfly garden, a monarch garden. So everybody's coming there and talking about vegetables, gives you an idea of, then we look at what else is available in our community. So we know that Wagner has a post to drill the fence that we wanted to put around. They came up. I wanted you to know that. So when we tallied things up, that in-kind donation just from our little community, Josh, was well over $10,000, and then a lot of elbow grease and not much money. This was something that the residents of Ovid said, we would like to do this. So to answer your question, we see that things improved through the Verona Village complex, and right down the road at Conifer, Carol, remember when we did the support group, people just really lonely, nothing to do. I got a beautiful email from Shirley saying, you know, thank you, STEPS, and it's not STEPS, they're STEPS. We're just organizers, but we were able to do something similar down there, a wood garden in the back, and we had some that many people were interested in. And then we had some art classes. We have small amount of operating funds where we could buy some supplies and have a little mobile art kit. Now every day, every Thursday, people come to the community room and they're art and talking. It evolved from this place where we're going to talk about our chronic illnesses, remember? And we did talk about our chronic illnesses, and finally it just, it just took a new shape and a new life where people are coming together, and it's made a huge difference. Those are our only 2 senior citizen housing complexes. But I've been to Carol's amazing food pantry, and I see folks that are just around this hospitality thing and talking. And this is a thing. I mean, Lodi is a food desert. There is nothing there. And I want to say too, while I'm thinking of it, remember we started with that little table in front of the old Whittier Library with a few tomatoes, and then we were able to leverage a Catholic Charities grant. And then the community health grant through the Greater Rochester Health Foundation, who's been amazing. They Also, I think they're invested in our area. They funded 3 of our towns' residential emergency signage. So that's a lot of money. I think and we were very grateful to have those in times of emergency. So these people, the old people that you're talking about, we need to be able to get to them in an emergency, and we need to know, what their house number is. That was a problem. Very grateful to the Greater Rochester Health Foundation that we now have house numbering in all of our towns. Romulus already had those, but the other 3 were funded.
I think transportation was the other big need in the area, and you probably can talk more about that.
Well, transportation in our community health assessment, we take a look at our local data, and that was the number 1 barrier, that people cannot get from point A to B. Now, as Deborah said, healthcare, trusted healthcare, and access to is only a part of what we do. It's important, but like 10% when we look at the whole framework, right, Deborah? But we noticed that we're so thrilled to have the Ovid Health Center in our neighborhood now, and our office happens to be in the lower level. I think you've been there, but that's just a part of it. So a lot of specialty care is Rochester and Syracuse, and we have people that need mental health services and substance abuse services. So when we say health, we're talking about behavioral health, medical, dental, the whole everything. So Dave Dresser, he's a resident. Him and about 5-6 other fellows came together and said, let's design a program called the South County Transportation Corps, and we'll jump through all the hoops. We'll go before the Board of Legislatures and say, can we have 54 cents a mile reimbursement, and how are we going to get this excess liability insurance covered? So there again, we went to the Greater Rochester Health Foundation with all our ducks in a row. But I will say that we did a lot of research, and Stay True Rural Health Network, who is my employer, shared some information and from other programs in other counties, went before the board. People were like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. Well, this is what STEPS does, and this is what our residents do. They persevere, and they carry on in when there's adversity, because it's, as Deborah said, we are a community that is used to, a resilient community. So Transportation Corps is up and running. David Dresser said, I have a dream. Someday this will be full county, and it is full county. Just after 1 year, it became full county. These are nice volunteer jobs. Talk about economic development. There's 12 volunteer drivers that are getting reimbursed that. Some of these folks can make $100 or like $1,000 a month. It's nice when you're retired to have that opportunity. So in the idea that people are building relationships and talking to their neighbors, and it's been a phenomenal project that is now lays in the hands of the Cayuga Seneca Action Agency. They're the fiduciary through the Community Health Grant now. So that's what STEPS does. We want to be sure things are sustainable and they go to wherever they need to go. So
let's shift slightly. Talking about that isolation, Deborah, it looks different in every community, obviously. How does it differ between South Seneca to a Rochester neighborhood? Obviously, isolation is still probably an issue to some extent, but it looks different, right?
It looks different. As I was listening to Teresa, I just have to add a little bit of dimension. She gave you a really great example about the seniors, but they've also got little tiny kids at the library various families coming together. They've got young families going out on hikes, on different walks in the community. So this is happening across the lifespan. What's different, I think, is related to what I mentioned a few minutes ago, that in the city there are larger issues of trust. So in the inner city neighborhood that the Greater Rochester Health Foundation is funding, there are major substance abuse issues and drug sale issues. And so the people living there have a difficult time trusting all of their neighbors because they don't know who's involved in what. And whether it's safe to actually be acting together with their neighbors. Over time, however, in the particular neighborhood, it's been really amazing to see people coming out, meeting their neighbors, and part of it is this focus on positives. So if I'm thinking about what are the assets in my neighborhood, I'm going to look at the person next door through that lens and say, well, maybe, if we both want to come outside and clean up the street or plant flowers, that's a safe thing. And as they get to know people, there are many, many, many new relationships that are happening there, and people call upon one another to do things together. They also have developed systems of engaging with the police around some of the very serious problems there. And they are all engaged with each other in trusting relationships through that work. So there you see it's denser, right? You can literally walk down 2 or 3 streets and say, oh, I can see resident engagement here because the houses are tidy. People on this block have adopted a vacant lot and turned it into a play lot or a park. The whole community has come together and literally taken over a crossroads that has had a regional bad name for I don't know how many decades. And this small community has taken over that corner. They've built a park and playground on one corner, a community garden on another corner, and they've really said we're going to occupy this space so that the drug dealers are going to have to go away, and they have achieved that. So connectedness there really manifests itself through this question of trust and who can you actually count on in your neighborhood, who's safe to work with and be friends with. Where I think it looks a little different here, there's less of that trust issue, and it's more about, what are we coming together around? What are we going to do together? If that
I
makes
love
sense.
this story Barb shared with us going out the gate about in the city of Rochester, how a moving truck just pulled up and emptied out the contents of someone's home with all these valuables, right? And, plenty of people around broad daylight. But it was because they didn't know their neighbors. Now, certainly that wouldn't happen in my neighborhood.
Right.
But, it's that kind of thing. I think, people sometimes don't connect like they do in our small towns.
So one of the things that seemed the common thread here seems to be the community education aspect of it, working together, learning, that sort of thing. What is the thing that you guys bring to the community as sort of that thing that they can take away from any event, or if they show up at something where you guys are, that they can sort of implement to help the broader cause?
Can I jump in
By
on
all
that
means.
one? I think we bring, and I'm saying collectively,
Right.
we bring a couple of things. One is this approach of let's take a look at what's good here. All of these communities have issues with some poverty, and people have challenges in all these communities.
Of course.
But we're saying, yeah, we know that. We can see it. We're aware of it. We've talked about it a lot. But we haven't really talked about what's good here and what's possible here and what people's ideas are. So I think that sort of mindset is, an alternative mindset is something that this project brings to people. And then I think it is providing opportunities for people to step out into what I'm going to call a small space. Like, what's a small idea? We don't have to, bring a university to Ovid. What's a small idea? And so instead of a major university, there's a communiversity, which is an idea about everybody has something to teach. So let's have people teach each other the things that they know. So for me, what we bring is a new way of looking at things and the opportunity to do something on a smaller scale, but that has meaning. And from my perspective as a former faculty member in community development, I think of that as building residents or helping residents become the co-producers of their own health and well-being. That's how I think of it, is that people are now producing health and well-being alongside what the doctor and the health clinic
Right.
can provide.
So then the next logical question is, how can folks get involved with STEPS, and then also how can folks get involved with the food pantry effort, which obviously takes time, energy, bodies to execute, just the nature of it. So starting with STEPS, and then we'll switch gears to Carol so she can jump in there.
Okay, so STEPS, we have a website, senecasteps.org, and through that website you can link to our Facebook and email us. My phone number is area code 607-403-0069. An opportunity or a ramp on to get involved with STEPS is a community group or conversation called the Risers. The Risers meet on October 24th at the Ovid Fire Department, 6:30. And I think we're going to have a guest speaker that night on some resiliency topic that folks were interested. But you can hear kind of a general overview of all the committees. Carol is our amazing Improving the Physical Environment work group leader as well. We have the Economic and Educational Work Group and Personal Health and Wellness Initiative. So you can hear about all the wonderful things that our STEPS is up to, and ways that you can get involved at that particular meeting. And I can be emailed or reached at those contact information.
All right.
Yeah.
And the food pantry.
We have a pantry every Saturday from 3 to 5 p.m. at the Lodi Presbyterian Church. And just stop by if you've got an extra watermelon or cucumber, or bring it by and share it. But we also encourage people just to stop by to see the incredible collection of donations of produce that we get. It really blows me away every week when I see the incredible array of foods that people are willing to share. And stop by and see what we can share with you.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you guys coming in to talk about all this really important stuff. And of course, best of luck with everything that you guys continue to fight for as you move forward.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.